write historical novels because I feel like that we have to understand history in order to understand where we are, and because it's so interesting. I was raised in Nashville, and I came up here to Lexington College, I think because my parents enjoyed coming up to the racetracks. I actually wanted to write when I was younger, but you got to make a living. I knew I wanted to be a serious writer, and literary fiction, even then, was a hard way to make a living. But I got to a point in my life where I could just feel the words coming out of my fingers. And it was like they itched all the time. So I started writing. And I really wrote for about 10 years before I ever talked to anybody much about that. The book that I first wrote was Cherokee America, which is the second book that I published. And I wrote Maud's Line in order to get Cherokee America published. I took it to a novels workshop. The instructor was a woman named Nancy Zafaris, and Nancy was an excellent writer. And I took it up there because I was extremely frustrated about it. I had sent it out to 94 different agents. She said, "This is the only publishable novel in this class. What have you done with it? Why haven't you been able to get an agent for it?" And I said, "I don't have any idea." And I told her how many times I tried, and she gave me some good advice. She said, "What you need to do, Margaret, is you need to write a book about 100,000 words long. It needs to be about a single character and follow that one character very closely. You know, this myth of the single hero is not an Indian myth. That's a white concept. Indians are much more community-based." But I took Nancy's advice, and I came home and I wrote Maud's Line. The first agent I sent it to picked it up. I think it took me about 2 years to write Maud's Line, maybe 18 months, which is an enormously fast rate to write. I knew all of the characters in Maud's Line from my life when I was younger. I took 4 of the characters from Cherokee America, who are young in that book, and I made them old people in Maud's Line. And so Maud's Line then set up Cherokee America. And because it was finalist for the Pulitzer, I didn't have any trouble getting Cherokee America published then. The phone rang, and it was the assistant to my agent. And she said, "Margaret, do you have time to talk to Lynn?" I always have time to talk to Lynn because Lynn Nesbitt is probably the best agent in the world. Lynn got on the line and she said, "Now, Margaret," she said, "I'm going to tell you something that's going to change your life. Now, the next thing I'm going to tell you is that you didn't win." And I said, "Okay." She said, "But you are a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize." I mean, I was just flabbergasted, and I didn't know what to do when I got off the phone. It took a long time for me to really understand that Lynn was correct, that it would change my life, and it did. I think the common thread in all of my stories is not a thread of morality particularly, but it's a thread of being grounded. Maud's Line, Cherokee America, and Stealing are all 3 set on land that I am very familiar with. They're all 3 set in Oklahoma. When Two Feathers Fell from the Sky is set in Nashville on land that I grew up on. It had been a zoo, a Civil War battleground, a Native American necropolis. I draw all those layers in. I'm really interested in layered history. I realized early on as a teenager that land was going to sustain me for the rest of my life. I promised land that I would write about it. And land is extraordinarily important to Native Americans. I don't know of any other group of people that has such a deep feeling for it. And I certainly do. I kept my part of the bargain. I thought the cabin was still empty until I saw the red rooster out in the road. He was really flame orange. But people called those roosters red, and he had a big, bright green feather curling over the top of his tail. I had on my sneakers and was walking in a smooth gully the rain had created. So I wasn't kicking up gravel or making any kind of noise, and he didn't look up from his pecking until I was close to him. Then he cocked his head to the side and looked me over slit-eyed. It was March. I hadn't been down that road since fall. And by the tilt of the rooster's head, it was clear to me he'd been around some time, maybe all winter. He owned that territory, or at least he owned the chicken part of it. And he wasn't going to give ground scared or even in a huff. He lifted a foot, held it up in a claw for only a second, and then he walked off like he had business in the weeds he'd been meaning to get to all morning. I admired him for that.
Create